I want to start today with a number.
Okay.
127.
Right. And that number, it looks so so sterile on a page, doesn't it? It's just digits in a production log.
It's nothing, but in the context of what we're talking about today, it's not a number. It's a weapon.
It is the clinical quantification of a human being's nervous breakdown.
Exactly. If you do something 127 times, you're usually practicing. You're a musician, an athlete. You're perfecting a craft.
You're building a skill.
But when we are talking about The Shining, and specifically that baseball bat scene with Shelley Duvall, 127 isn't a take count.
No.
It's a record of abuse, period.
And that is really the core of what we're getting into today.
Yeah.
Because this film, it's a monolith. Everyone knows it.
It's everywhere. The twins, the axe, here's Johnny. It's just part of our cultural wallpaper at this point.
But looking at this source material we've got, this report they've titled Blood on the Lens, production notes, even architectural blueprints, it forces you to completely reframe the movie.
We're not looking at a horror movie today.
No. We are conducting a forensic analysis of a crime scene.
A crime scene, yes, but also a confession and a psychological weapon aimed right at the audience. We have 4 very specific, very dark layers to peel back.
Right.
We're going to talk about the systematic torture of Shelley Duvall, and I do not use that word lightly.
We shouldn't.
We'll get into the what the report calls the symbolic homicide of Stephen King's original novel.
A fascinating and incredibly petty feud.
Oh, it's the pettiest. Then there's the big one, the cinematic confession theory about the Apollo 11 moon landing.
Which is, I have to say, far more visually dense and deliberate than most people give it credit for. It's not just a coincidence.
And finally, the Impossible Hotel. The way the actual architecture was designed to, well, to break your brain.
To induce a kind of subliminal nausea.
But we have to start with the human cost. We have to start with Shelley. Because when I was going through these notes, I wasn't just interested. I got angry. I'm still angry.
And that anger is justified. To really get it, you have to do something difficult. You have to take off the film critic hat.
Right.
Forget the genius label we reflexively attach to Stanley Kubrick. Critics for 40 years have called her performance as Wendy a triumph of vulnerability.
I've read those reviews. They praise the raw, hysterical edge she has.
But this psychological autopsy in our source material makes a compelling case that what we're watching on screen isn't acting technique. It's not a choice.
It's biology.
It is a raw autonomic survival instinct. He didn't direct her to an emotion. He subjected her to a stimulus until her body produced the required terror.
He didn't want her to play a terrified woman.
He wanted a terrified woman.
And he was perfectly willing to manufacture that terror in reality to get it on film.
Which brings us to this idea of the director as tyrant. Our notes describe his method as a sustained psychological siege. And that's a really important distinction. Well, directing is guiding. It's helping an actor find a truth within themselves. It's a partnership. Breaking is something else entirely. It's stripping away their professional and psychological defenses until they have no choice but to react from the deepest, most primal part of their brain.
Which takes us right back to that number. 127 takes.
The baseball bat scene.
Wendy, backing up the main staircase, swinging that bat at Jack. She's crying, she's screaming, "Get away from me," over and over and
Little
over.
hours. For days.
Logistically, what is the point? I mean, really, by take 25, the lighting is perfect?
Oh, absolutely. By take 30, the lines are memorized. Any competent director has the usable shot in the can within an hour or two.
So what was he doing for the other 100 takes?
He wasn't filming for the shot. The report calls it psychological attrition.
That sounds like a military term.
It is. It's about wearing down a defense until it collapses. Think about it. For the first, say, 50 or 60 takes, an actor is still performing. They're making conscious choices.
Right. I'll hold the bat this way. I'll hit my mark here. My motivation is...
Exactly. Their prefrontal cortex, the logical planning part of the brain, is still engaged. But what happens when you force a person to endure extreme physical and emotional stress for 9, 10, 12 hours?
The system overloads.
It just shuts down. The prefrontal cortex basically goes offline from pure exhaustion.
Yeah.
And something else takes over.
The lizard brain.
Yes. By take 100, Shelley Duvall is in a state of what psychologists call hyperarousal. Her bloodstream is a toxic cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline. She isn't thinking, what would Wendy do?
She's thinking, I need to survive this moment. This man is not going to say cut.
The terror you see in her eyes is not the fictional terror of a character. It's the real biological terror of an actress realizing her director has no intention of stopping the ordeal.
And the ordeal had a real physical toll. This wasn't just, art is hard. Her body was literally breaking down.
It was. The report details the wounds on her hand.
From the bat.
From just gripping that solid wood bat. Imagine clenching it for hours on end while you're sweating and trembling and swinging. Her skin was literally shearing off her palms. She had open sores.
And her voice, in that scene, you can hear it, the raspiness.
Her throat was raw. And she was suffering from severe dehydration, not from the set lights, but from constant, uncontrollable weeping.
She said so herself. I read the quote. She said her body eventually just rebelled. She wasn't even sad anymore. She just couldn't stop crying.
Think about the physiology of that. Her autonomic nervous system, the thing that regulates your body's functions, had lost control. Her tear ducts were just leaking. Her stress response was stuck in the on position.
It's the body just screaming, I am under attack.
It is.
And this is where the story for me just turns my stomach. Because it wasn't just the difficulty of the scene itself. It was the entire environment he deliberately engineered around her.
The isolation tactic.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It's a classic and frankly quite cruel psychological conditioning technique. Kubrick gave an explicit order to the entire cast and crew, people she worked with every day.
People she shared meals with, saw first thing in the morning. He forbade them from sympathizing with her. They were to be cold, dismissive.
He's isolating the victim, that is.
Yeah.
That's textbook abuser behavior. That's what cult leaders do.
It is. The source has anecdotes. If she was sitting in her chair between those torturous takes, just weeping from exhaustion, and a makeup artist or a grip tried to go over and comfort her, put a hand on her shoulder,
Kubrick would stop them.
he would intervene publicly. He'd say, don't sit.
So that when the cameras rolled, he wouldn't have to direct her fear.
He would just have to capture it.
Yeah.
He wanted to completely dissolve the line between the fiction of the film and the reality of her life.
That's professional gaslighting. It's making her feel like she's actually losing her mind so she can play a character who is losing her mind.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It induced actual clinical paranoia, and the stress manifested physically.
Alopecia.
Yes, her hair started falling out.
Not just a little, in clumps.
In clumps, which is a classic sign of the body being under extreme systemic shock. When your system is that flooded with stress hormones, it begins to shut down non-essential functions.
Like growing hair.
It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And the most damning part of this story is that when she literally presented him with the physical evidence of her torture, holding clumps of her own hair in her hands,
He ignored her.
completely ignored it, didn't care.
To him, it was just another texture in the performance.
A sign that his methods were working.
That's the verdict for me on this first layer. We all watch The Shining, and we think we're watching a woman who's afraid of ghosts and her crazy husband.
Right. A supernatural story.
But what you're actually watching is a 40-year-old documentary of workplace abuse. The only thing that was protecting Shelley Duvall from a complete and total breakdown was the camera lens itself.
It completely recontextualizes the film as a snuff film of the spirit.
A perfect description. He sacrificed her well-being for his shot.
And this obsession with total control, with breaking things down to rebuild them in his own image, it didn't stop with his actors.
No, it didn't. It extended to the source material itself.
Which brings us to our second layer, the intellectual warfare.
Because if Shelley Duvall was the physical victim on set,
The original story was the ideological one.
the great feud, King versus Kubrick, this is the stuff of Hollywood legend.
It is, and Stephen King has never been shy about it. He has hated this movie publicly for decades.
He famously called it a beautiful Cadillac with no engine.
Which is such a devastatingly precise insult.
It's perfect. It looks great. It's shiny. It's expensive. Everyone is impressed.
But it has no heart. It goes nowhere. It's just a cold machine.
And to really understand why he felt that way, you have to look at the fundamental philosophical clash between the two men. The notes label King a humanist and Kubrick a nihilist.
That's a great summary. Let's break that down. In King's novel, The Shining is a domestic tragedy.
Absolutely. Jack Torrance is a good man with a bad disease. He's an alcoholic. He loves his son. He's trying to hold his family together. He's trying to stay on the wagon.
The Overlook Hotel in the book is a genuinely evil external force. It's a predator that senses his weakness and attacks him. It possesses him.
The story is, in a strange way, warm. It's about a family struggling. For King, evil is something that happens to people.
Exactly. It's an outside force. But for Kubrick is cold. He's a clinical observer of inevitable human failure.
Right. In his movie, the hotel isn't really the monster. It's just a mirror. Or maybe an amplifier.
It just reveals what was already there. Jack Torrance doesn't get possessed in the film. He just gets permission to be who he always was.
He was already broken. You see it in the first scene, driving in the car. He's annoyed by Wendy. He's detached. There's no warmth there at all.
Kubrick's thesis is that the evil isn't in the ghosts. The evil is in the man. And he wanted to make sure Stephen King got the message loud and clear.
He didn't just adapt the book. The report calls it authorial assassination.
A perfect term for it.
And we have to talk about the car. This is the pettiest, most expensive, most brilliant insult in the history of cinema. I'm obsessed with this detail.
The Volkswagen Beetle.
In the book, the Torrance family drives a Red Beetle. It's a very specific choice from King. It represents their blue-collar struggle. It's a cheap, quirky, noticeable car.
It's their identity. It's part of the fabric of the novel.
In the movie, the car is yellow.
Now, on the surface, most people would just say, okay, a simple aesthetic choice.
Right. Yellow probably looks better against the snow on camera. Directors change details all the time.
But we're talking about Stanley Kubrick. He did not make simple aesthetic choices. Every detail is deliberate. You have to watch closely in the scene where Dick Halloran is racing back to the hotel in the blizzard.
It's a very tense, dramatic scene.
And he drives past this horrific accident on the side of the road. A massive semi-trailer has jackknifed and crushed, completely mangled underneath the truck.
Is a Red Beetle.
A destroyed red Volkswagen Beetle.
It's a billion-dollar middle finger. It's unbelievable. He staged a massive stunt, rented a semi, crushed a car just to visually murder Stephen King's car on screen.
He's literally killing the source material. He is sending a direct, unmistakable message to the author and to anyone paying attention. This is not your story anymore. I have crushed your version. Your little red car is dead.
But the rabbit hole goes deeper. It's not just about destroying King's car. It's about why he chose a yellow one. This brings us to the lemon theory.
This is where it connects to advertising history, of all things.
Which is so Kubrick.
So why a yellow VW? The answer lies in one of the most famous ad campaigns of the 20th century. The Doyle Dane Burnback Think Small campaign for Volkswagen.
Right, it changed everything.
And within that campaign, there was a specific, iconic print ad. It just showed a picture of a yellow beetle on a white background, and underneath it, a single word.
Lemon.
Lemon. And in automotive slang, a lemon is a defective product, a car that looks perfectly fine on the showroom floor, but is fundamentally broken on the inside. It's a dud.
It doesn't work. It's a waste of time and money.
Precisely. And Kubrick, being an obsessive researcher of history and semiotics, would have absolutely known this. He also would have known about VW's sordid origins in Nazi Germany as the people's car.
So the theory is, by making Jack's car the yellow lemon car, he's labeling Jack Torrance himself as a lemon.
He's a defective product, a defective American man, a defective father. He came off the assembly line broken.
Wow. So where King saw a good man battling a disease,
Kubrick saw a faulty piece of machinery that was always destined to fail. He's saying King's story is soft, and his is the brutal historical reality.
this is just, it's a war on all fronts. He's at war with his actors. He's at war with his author. He is systematically destroying every comforting idea in his path.
Including perhaps the most comforting American idea of the 20th century.
And now we get to the third layer.
This is where we strap in.
The cinematic confession.
This is the part of the deep dive where some people will check out and others will lean in so close their nose touches the screen.
This is deep, deep down the rabbit hole. The theory, in a nutshell, is this. The Shining is Stanley Kubrick's elaborate encoded confession that he helped the United States government fake the Apollo 11 moon landing.
Right. And before you dismiss it as just, tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff.
And it sounds like it. It sounds like a 3 a.m. forum post.
It does. But our job here isn't to say he did it or he didn't do it.
Yeah.
We are not here to debate the moon landing. We're here to analyze the text.
And the text is the film. We're here to say, look at what he deliberately put in the frame. Because the sheer volume of visual evidence, it pushes past coincidence.
The density of the references is, from a statistical point of view, impossible to ignore. Kubrick started as a photographer for Look magazine. He composed every single frame with meticulous intent. Nothing is in the shot by accident.
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious piece of evidence. Let's start with Danny.
Danny Torrance, the boy.
Yeah.
There's a key scene. We've all seen it.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing with his toys on the floor of the hallway. He gets up.
And on a sweater.
Is a huge hand-knitted graphic of an Apollo 11 rocket mid-launch.
It's not subtle. It takes up his entire chest. It's the focus of the shot.
Yeah, it's basically a billboard.
Yeah.
So you have the boy wearing the rocket. Now look where he was sitting before he stood up. Look at the carpet.
The famous or infamous orange, red, and brown hexagonal carpet.
The Higgs hexagon pattern. Analysts who have studied this have pointed out that the geometric pattern bears a striking, undeniable resemblance to the aerial schematic view of Launch Pad 39A at Cape Canaveral.
The Apollo 11 launch pad.
The exact one. So let's connect the visual dots. You have the boy, Danny, representing the mission's payload.
He's wearing the rocket.
And he's sitting on the launch pad. And what does he do in the scene?
He stands up. He launches.
He launches, and he walks slowly, deliberately down the hall towards a very specific room.
Room 237.
The number. The single most debated number in horror film history.
And this, for the theorists, is the absolute smoking gun. Because in Stephen King's book, The Evil Room is room 217.
Kubrick changed it. Now, the official story from the studio is that the Timberline Lodge, where they filmed the exterior shots, asked him to change it.
Right. They had a real room 217, and they were afraid guests wouldn't want to stay there after the movie came out.
So they asked him to use a non-existent room number. And that story, it makes perfect sense on a surface, PR level.
But the question is, why 237? He could have chosen any number that didn't exist. Why not 250? Why not 300? Why that specific number?
Because the distance?
The distance from the Earth to the moon.
The average distance is approximately 237,000 miles. It's the number that was widely published in textbooks at the time.
So let's trace that visual sentence again. Danny launches from the pad
Powering the rocket.
and travels 237,000 miles to the forbidden room, the room of secrets.
When you lay it out like that, it's not just a collection of random Easter eggs. It's a cohesive visual narrative. It tells a story.
And there's more. It's not just that one scene.
Oh, it's everywhere. Go back to the beginning of the film, the scene in the pantry where Wendy and Halloran are taking inventory.
I know this one. Look at the shelves behind them.
What is stacked, floor to ceiling, in prominent focus?
Tang. Giant cans of Tang.
The official powdered breakfast drink of the Mercury astronauts. It's synonymous with the space program. It's another visual billboard.
And the twins. The creepy girls in the hallway.
The Gemini program. Gemini, of course, is Latin for twins. The Gemini missions were the crucial precursor to the Apollo program. You had to have Gemini before you could land on the moon.
So the twins lead to the rocket.
The Gemini program leads to the Apollo program. And there's more. In Stuart Ullman's office, right at the beginning, on his desk, there is a statuette of an American eagle.
The eagle has landed. The name of the Apollo 11 lunar module was the Eagle.
It's a whole constellation of symbols all pointing in the same direction.
Yeah.
It's too dense to be accidental.
So if we accept this theory for the sake of the argument, what is he trying to say? Why confess this in a horror movie?
This is where the interpretation of Jack Torrance takes another sharp turn. In his reading of the film, Jack isn't just a stand-in for a defective father.
He's a stand-in for Kubrick himself.
Correct. Let's re-examine Jack's big meltdown scene with Wendy. He's screaming at her about his responsibilities, but listen to the words he uses.
He's not really talking about writing a book anymore.
No. He yells, "Does it matter to you at all that the owners have placed their confidence in me, that I have signed a letter of agreement? A contract."
He's obsessed with this contract. I have a duty to my employers. It's all very formal, very legalistic.
It doesn't sound like a winter caretaker talking about keeping a boiler lit. It sounds like a government contractor bound by a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA.
So the theory is, Kubrick made a deal with the devil, so to speak. He used the front projection technology that he perfected for 2001, A Space Odyssey,
Which was years ahead of its time.
to film the fake landing footage for the government. And in this metaphor, the Overlook Hotel isn't a hotel.
It's the lie itself. It's a cold, isolated, opulent prison where the man who holds the world's biggest secret is slowly going mad.
Jack trying to write his book is Kubrick trying to tell the truth. But he can't. He's blocked. All he can type is, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." He's trapped in the endless repeating loop of the lie.
He is a man being crushed by the weight of a world-shattering secret.
It paints this picture of a filmmaker who is legally gagged, desperate to confess. So he weaves the confession into the visual fabric of his next project. He puts it in the carpet, on the sweaters, on the shelves.
He's either confessing out of guilt or, and this is the darker reading,
It's me bragging.
He's mocking the audience. Look at the grand illusion I pulled off. You believe what you see in this movie is real, just like you believed what you saw on your television screens in 1969. You were all so easy to fool.
That is much, much darker. But if we're going to talk about fooling the audience, about disorienting them and making them question what's real...
Then we have to go to the final layer.
Because the moon landing stuff, you have to hunt for it. It's hidden in symbols. But this next layer, you don't have to hunt for it.
No, it's hidden in the walls. It surrounds you for the entire runtime.
The Impossible Hotel.
Spatial horror. This is, in my opinion, Kubrick's most brilliant and subtle trick in the whole film. This is the element that messes with your brain on a deep subconscious level without you ever consciously realizing what's happening.
You know, I've always felt physically ill watching this movie. Not scared in a jump scare way, but queasy, a kind of motion sickness. I always just assumed it was the Steadicam work.
The Steadicam is part of it, for sure, that long, smooth, predatory movement.
Yeah.
But the root cause is something the report calls induced cognitive dissonance. And it is entirely intentional.
You have to remember, Kubrick was a master chess player. He was a photographer with a genius for composition. He did not make continuity errors.
No. If a chair is in a different spot in the next shot, he moved it on purpose. If a pattern on the floor changes direction, he did it on purpose.
So when we say the Impossible Hotel, we mean it's literally physically impossible.
We mean that the Overlook Hotel, as depicted on screen, cannot exist in three-dimensional Euclidean space. If you were to try and build it based on what you see in the film, the walls would intersect. Rooms would occupy the same space. It's a physical paradox.
Okay, give us the clearest example. The undeniable smoking gun of the impossible architecture.
It has to be the impossible window.
In Ullman's office at the very beginning.
The very beginning. We watch Jack walk into the hotel lobby, he's guided down a corridor, and he enters the manager's office. From that unbroken tracking shot, we know exactly where that office is located.
It's in the middle of the building. It's an interior room. It should be surrounded by other hallways or offices.
Correct. There's no possible way it has an exterior wall. And yet, when Jack is inside talking to Ullman,
there is a massive window right behind Ullman's desk.
A huge window, showing bright sunshine and trees outside.
It's a ghost window. It can't be there. That window should be looking into a solid wall, or maybe the hotel kitchen.
Exactly. Now, your conscious brain is focused on the dialogue, on Jack Nicholson's performance. But your subconscious brain, the part that has evolved over millions of years to create spatial maps of your environment to keep you safe.
It's screaming error.
It knows that window is a violation of physics. And that conflict, your eyes seeing one thing and your deep brain knowing it's wrong, that's what creates the subliminal nausea. It's a sense of profound wrongness.
It makes you feel unsafe on a level you can't even articulate.
It makes the hotel feel like it's a living, shifting organism. It's gaslighting the audience's very sense of direction. You feel unmoored, lost.
And it's not just the one window. This happens all over the hotel.
Oh, constantly. You have doors to nowhere.
Yeah.
There's a scene where Danny is playing in a hallway, and a door that in a previous scene led to a pantry now opens onto a solid brick wall.
And the gold room. The giant ballroom.
That's the most egregious example. Based on the hallways that the characters used to enter the 1920s party, the gold room would have to be physically located outside the building. It would be floating in midair above the parking lot. It simply does not fit within the hotel's established footprint.
So the characters are literally walking out of one reality and into another.
They are entering a labyrinth that actively defies the laws of physics. And the only person who seems to navigate it with any ease is Danny.
On his tricycle. That sound is so iconic. The big plastic wheels going from the loud hardwood floor to the muffled carpet.
Thump, 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 then whoosh, thump, 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 then whoosh. And this brings us back to the carpet, the Higgs hexagon.
The launch pad.
It serves a dual purpose. Beyond the Apollo reference, it's a masterpiece of perspective manipulation. The geometric pattern is designed to create an optical illusion of lengthening. It's a one-point perspective on steroids.
It makes the hallways look endless, predatory.
Exactly. It draws your eye down this infinite vanishing point. It's like you're being pulled into a throat.
The hotel's digestive system, that is a horrifying thought.
Some analysts have even connected the hex shape of the pattern to a curse, a hex. The six sides of the hexagon to the sixth sense, the shine itself.
So the hotel is using its very geometry to trap the people who can see its true nature.
It explains why the film feels so intensely claustrophobic, even though the sets themselves are cavernous and empty.
You feel trapped because the map in your head keeps getting erased. You can't learn the layout.
Kubrick broke the map on purpose. He wanted you, the viewer, to feel like a rat in a maze that rearranges its walls every time you turn a corner.
It's masterful, but it's so manipulative. It's cruel to the viewer in a way.
That is the essence of Kubrick. Total, absolute control over your perception of reality.
Okay, so let's pull back and do the necropsy, as the report calls it. Let's lay all 4 layers out on the table.
Right.
Layer 1, the real trauma, the documented abuse of Shelley Duvall, the director as tyrant.
Later 2, the petty grudge, the symbolic homicide of Stephen King's novel.
Layer 3, the government cipher, the elaborate hidden confession about faking the moon landing.
And layer 4, the spatial gaslighting, the impossible hotel designed to subliminally attack the viewer.
When you put it all together, you get a composite image of a film that is so much more than just a scary ghost story.
It fundamentally changes how you watch it. You can no longer just sit back with popcorn and wait for the jump scares.
No, because you realize the entire film is a psychological trap, and it's one that is still claiming victims in a way 40 years later.
We're the victims now. We're here, obsessing over it, trapped in his maze.
When you watch The Shining now, with all this context, you're watching the documentation of a collapse.
Multiple collapses happening simultaneously.
The collapse of an actress's spirit, the collapse of an author's narrative, the collapse of a national secret, and the collapse of physical reality itself.
It is the ultimate deep dive. There is no bottom. Every time you think you've found the floor, it opens up and drops you into another room that shouldn't exist.
And that leads me to my final thought on all this. For decades, we were all taught to be terrified of Jack Torrance.
He's the monster on the poster. Axe in hand, demonic grin.
He's the villain, but he's really just a distraction, isn't he?
He's the final illusion.
Exactly. When you look at the real evidence, the hair falling out on set, the crushed red car on the side of the road, the impossible window that breaks your brain, it becomes so clear that we were afraid of the wrong person the entire time.
Jack was just another pawn in the maze.
The scariest monster in The Shining wasn't Jack Torrance.
It was Stanley Kubrick.
The man who built the maze.
And then locked us all inside with him.
That's it for this deep dive. Sleep well, if you can.
Good luck finding the exit.